In this video, we're going to go over some of the linguistic puzzles that Russell's theory of definite descriptions is meant to solve. So aside from the two problems or puzzles that we saw with Frege, the puzzle of identity statements and the puzzle of propositional attitude reports, Russell thinks that a theory of language or should also be able to solve other types of linguistic puzzles. So one of those linguistic puzzles is what is often referred to as the vacuous terms puzzle or non-referring expressions puzzle. So the way that this puzzle is generated is along the lines of the other two puzzles. First, let us assume that something like the simple or naive theory is true. If we recall, the simple theory or the naive theory maintains that the meaning of linguistic expressions, in particular proper names or singular terms, are just the objects that the name or term is supposed to refer to, right? So for instance, if we have the sentence, the earth is round, well, the meaning of earth is just the earth itself. That is the meaning. The object itself is the meaning of the term earth, and the meaning of the predicate is round is just the property of being round. Well, what if we come across a sentence whose subject is not something that actually exists, something that in fact we know does not exist, like Santa Claus or Harry Potter? Well, now in that case, we'll consider the sentence Santa Claus is jolly. Intuitively, we take that sentence to be a meaningful sentence. But if we assume that something like the naive theory is correct, then it turns out, or at least it is entailed by the naive theory, that the sentence Santa Claus is jolly is meaningless because there is nothing that the proper name Santa Claus refers to. But of course, we would step back and say, well, that's ridiculous. Of course, the sentence Santa Claus is jolly has a meaning. It is meaningful. In fact, we know that it's meaningful. But the naive theory doesn't seem to capture the meaningfulness of that sentence because it stipulates that the meaning of proper names or singular terms like Santa Claus are the objects that they refer to. But in this case, there is no object to which the term or name Santa Claus refers to. Hence, the sentence turns out to be meaningless under the naive theory. And that seems to be a real problem that the naive theory faces. The other problem that Russell considers is what is known as the puzzle of negative existential claims. So a negative existential claim is a sentence of the following sort. The tooth fairy does not exist, right? So intuitively, when we look at or we take the sentence, the tooth fairy does not exist, we think that that sentence is true. It is true that the tooth fairy does not exist. If we assume something like the naive theory, again, the naive theory maintains that the meaning of singular terms, referring expressions like the tooth fairy, are just the things for which it stands for. But in this case, we already know that there's no such thing as the tooth fairy, and what we're saying of the tooth fairy is that it does not exist. Now, again, this seems like an intuitively true sentence. However, in order for it to come out true, paradoxically, under the naive theory, what we would need is the term the tooth fairy to refer to the tooth fairy, but then at the same time, it has to be true of this thing that we are referring to, the tooth fairy, that it not exist. Now, of course, that's impossible. That is contradictory, but this seems to be the condition or a requirement of the naive theory in order to make sense of a sentence like the tooth fairy does not exist. Of course, it seems a bit circular or paradoxical, so this turns out to be a very serious limitation or serious problem for the naive theory. So how does Russell solve the first problem, the problem of vacuous terms? Well, remember, for Russell, all proper names, Hector, Aristotle, Santa Claus, are really just disguised definite descriptions. And remember, disguised definite descriptions are just a collection of quantifiers and predicates. That's all that they are. So when we say something like Santa Claus, what we mean is that there is, well, by the name Santa Claus, there's presumably some kind of definite description that is associated with it. For instance, the individual that delivers presents on Christmas Eve, right? And now the proper logical structure of that would be something along the lines of there is a thing such that that thing delivers presents on Christmas Eve, and for anything, whatever that thing may be, if that thing also delivers presents on Christmas Eve, then it has to be identical, numerically identical to the original thing we identified as the thing that delivers presents on Christmas Eve, meaning there is just one and only one thing that delivers presents on Christmas Eve, right? That is the meaning of Santa Claus. And thus, now if we take a sentence like Santa Claus is jolly, what we further add is the predicate that one thing that we've already identified as the unique thing that delivers presents on Christmas Eve, that thing is also jolly. So unlike in the simple theory where the proposition expressed by Santa Claus is jolly would be something like the complex entity that has Santa Claus in it and the property of jolliness. Now, there wouldn't be such a proposition because there is no Santa Claus. Under this account that Russell is presenting, the proposition expressed by Santa Claus is jolly would be something like a structured proposition, this complex that has as its constituents all of these properties, right? So it has properties and quantifiers. It has the quantifier, the existential quantifier, there is an X such that, blah, 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 blah. The predicate delivers presents on Christmas Eve, the universal quantifier, and so on and so forth. That is the information content or the meaning that is expressed by the sentence Santa Claus is jolly. And this is what gives the sentence Santa Claus is jolly its meaning. This is why the sentence is meaningful, even though the singular term Santa Claus doesn't refer to anything, right? Even though there is no Santa Claus, the sentence is still meaningful because of this, according to Russell. So how does Russell go about solving the second problem? Well, again, right, for Russell, all proper names are just disguised definite descriptions, where a proper analysis of definite descriptions is just this composition of various different quantifier phrases like the existential quantifier and the universal quantifier, in addition to some predicates. Now, under this analysis, the existential quantifier does not serve as a predicate. It is not something that we predicate of an object, like is something, right, like, or it exists. Instead, the existential quantifier or existence is just a quantifier phrase. That's what it is. It just quantifies over a domain or range of something, right? So in this case, right, if we take the proper analysis, or at least what Russell takes to be the proper analysis of the sentence, Santa Claus does not exist, what we actually get is something along the following lines. We get something like, it is not the case that there is an object X such that X delivers presents on Christmas Eve. And I mean, I'm shorthanding it here, but you get the picture, right? So now when we have something along the lines of this, right, as opposed to where in the simple theory, we would need to have actually Santa Claus and then predicate of Santa Claus that it doesn't exist. That's where we are led into the paradox. Under Russell's analysis, get the following, right? It is not the case that there is a thing such that this thing delivers presents, yada, 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 right? And that's true because we know that there is no Santa Claus. That's what the sentence Santa Claus does not exist means, right? When we say Santa Claus does not exist, what we're saying is that there is not a thing. There's no person that actually performs these functions of delivering presents around the world on Christmas Eve. So under Russell's analysis, right, if we take Russell's analysis to be correct, that all proper names are disguised definite descriptions, and that definite descriptions are just compositions of quantifiers and predicates, then what we get in the case of a negative existential, because now the negation here, the tilde, is coming in front of this quantifier, existential quantifier phrase, we are getting the true sentence that it is not the case that there is such a thing, such that that thing delivers presents on Christmas Eve. Now, finally, when you read on denoting, you see that Russell is also concerned with the two linguistic puzzles that Frege was concerned with, the puzzle of identity and the puzzle of propositional attitude reports. Now, both of those puzzles, according to Russell, are solved along the lines of the way in which Frege went to go about solving them. Now, the only difference, at least for our purposes, between Russell's analysis, or sorry, I should say Frege's way of solving the puzzle and the way that Russell goes about solving the puzzle, is that where Frege thought that different types of names expressed different types of senses, right? And again, more or less, a sense is the content that would be expressed with an equivalent definite description. Russell just bypasses this notion of sense and just says, no, the names have various different definite descriptions associated with them. They don't need this like sense stuff. It's just the definite description itself. And again, the proper analysis of a definite description is that it's really just a compilation or a combination of all of these quantifier phrases and predicate phrases. So, I mean, the differences between Russell and Frege when it comes to solving the puzzles of identity statements and the puzzle of propositional attitude reports is really just the difference in terms of like the technical mechanisms that they are using. But from the perspective of, say, the simple theory, or somebody who subscribes to the simple theory, more or less, and we'll see this more along the lines when we read Kripke, Russell and Frege's theory are pretty much equivalent, at least when it comes to this purpose. So that concludes the end of this video.